Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just focusing on that single shot in Sarajevo. We're going deeper.
Much deeper. We're looking at the underlying forces, the beliefs, and the competition that really set the stage for 1914, made it feel almost inevitable, maybe.
Exactly. If you really want to grasp the long-term causes of World War I, you've got to look beyond the immediate politics. You need to understand the structural drivers. So today, we're distilling insights from the source material on three really intertwined concepts: imperialism, modernization, and racism.
And how they fed off each other.
Yeah, and how they became this engine for global conflict. And crucially, we want to explore how the foundations, capitalism, the Industrial Revolution, that shaped 1914, how they're still shaping your world in 2025.
It's quite a connection to draw.
It is. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. We need to link these three: modernization, imperialism, and racism. Let's begin with modernization. It sounds, well, pretty harmless, doesn't it?
It does, on the surface, but it's actually loaded. Modernization isn't just about getting new gadgets or factories. It's this profound cultural pressure.
Pressure how?
It's this overwhelming feeling, almost a compulsion, where individuals, whole nations sometimes, feel they have to update everything, their culture, their ideas, their way of life, to match whoever holds the power.
So conforming to the dominant model.
Precisely. In the 19th century, after capitalism really took hold, the prestigious class was the bourgeoisie, right? The business owners, the managers. So modernizing meant adopting their style. Strict schedules, valuing efficiency, suits, that sort of thing. Moving away from older status symbols like nobility or the church.
The sources call it aborregimiento.
Right, which we could translate as maybe intense societal gentrification. Or like a bourgeois conversion project. Everyone pushed to become like the middle class.
And the sources point out there's a sort of hidden violence in this pressure to conform.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't or can't adopt this new model, well, you face ridicule, sometimes outright force.
Can you give an example?
Well, think about the elderly. In many traditional societies, they were the wise ones, respected for their experience.
Right.
But in this new industrial modern world, they're often seen as the least adapted, maybe unable to keep up with technology, sometimes dismissed as, not useful anymore.
That's a kind of cultural dismissal.
It is a subtle violence, maybe. And this intense need to prove you are modern just escalated. It fueled global competition. Think about Britain and Germany building massive navies, the scramble for colonies. Everyone desperate not to be left behind.
Okay, so modernization creates the pressure cooker and the technological tools. Then imperialism. That's the mechanism for projecting this power outwards.
Exactly. Imperialism at its core is simple domination. One country, the more powerful one, controlling another.
And acting purely in its own interests.
Completely. Ignoring the needs, the desires, the culture of the people they're dominating. It's bullying, really, but on an international scale.
And different from older empires, like Rome.
Yeah, the sources make that distinction. Roman or medieval empires might have been about glory or spreading religion or simple conquest, but 19th century imperialism, that was different.
How so?
It was uniquely powered by the Industrial Revolution, giving them the advanced weapons, the steamships, the railways, to actually do it on a massive scale.
And driven by capitalism.
Yes, mandated by it almost. The bourgeois elites, the corporations, they needed raw materials for their factories, they needed desperately cheap labor, and they needed controlled markets where they could sell their goods without competition. Colonies provided all three.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. You have these European elites talking about liberty, individual rights at home. How on earth did they justify seizing land and exploiting millions elsewhere?
Well, they had to manufacture justifications, didn't they? Two main ways, according to the sources. First, intense nationalism.
Our country needs to grow or die, that kind of thing.
Pretty much. The idea that national greatness requires expansion, requires colonies, or you'll become irrelevant, weak. And second, and this is crucial, the idea that they were helping the people they conquered.
Helping them.
Civilizing them. Forcing them to adopt supposedly superior European ways, European institutions. Modernizing them, whether they liked it or not. It was framed as a burden, a duty.
That sounds like Rudyard Kipling. The white man's burden.
Exactly. That poem is like the literary mission statement for this kind of justification. It casts imperialism as a noble, if difficult, task.
Which brings us neatly to the third piece, racism.
Racism is the well, the essential lubricant that makes the whole imperial machine run smoothly, morally speaking.
How do you mean?
It's not just noticing that people look different or have different customs. It's the belief, the deep-seated conviction that these differences make a group inferior.
And often linked to their perceived failure to modernize.
Very often, they're seen as unwilling or unable to adopt the superior modern ways. So you create stereotypes: lazy, irrational, childlike, savage, whatever fits, dehumanizing them.
Precisely. By framing them as less civilized, less human, you make it morally acceptable to dominate them, exploit them, even commit violence against them. It removed the moral consequence for the powerful.
Okay, let's make this concrete. The sources give examples showing this system isn't just Europeans versus, say, Africans or Asians. It happens within Europe, too, right?
Oh, definitely. Imperialism isn't just about overseas colonies. It's a policy of power imbalance and self-interest. Think about Napoleon in Spain in the early 1800s.
Right, France invaded Spain.
But why? It wasn't really about French glory in the old sense. It was pure economic strategy. Napoleon wanted to force all of Europe to stop trading with Britain, his main rival.
Part of his continental system.
Exactly. Spain's own needs, its own priorities, completely ignored. France acted solely in its own capitalist interest. That's textbook imperialism, even between European nations.
And a much bleaker example: Britain and Ireland.
Yeah, especially in the mid-19th century. Ireland was effectively governed for the economic benefit of English landowners and elites.
And the Great Famine. The Great Famine, from 1845 to 1852, is just a horrific illustration of this. Millions starved, millions more forced to leave the country.
Because the potato crop failed.
Yes, but the truly damning part: throughout the worst years of the famine, Ireland continued to export food grain, cattle, to Britain.
While the Irish were starving.
While they were starving. The economic interests of the dominant nation, England, simply overrode the survival of the dominated population in Ireland. It shows how the system prioritizes profit over people, strips away any idea of shared humanity or obligation.
So once you have that racist justification in place, making one group seem lesser, and you add intense economic pressure, the step towards extreme violence gets shorter.
It seems so. Which leads us to maybe the most extreme outcome, where all three: modernization pressure, imperialist goals, and racist justification converge: genocide.
And the sources point to the Armenian genocide.
Yes, between 1915 and 1917, during World War I, this was horrific imperialist violence within the Ottoman Empire, which was itself trying to modernize in a way.
How did the concepts fit together there?
Well, the ruling Turkish elite saw the Armenian Christian minority as an obstacle. They were economic competitors, seen as potentially disloyal possible allies of Russia, the Ottoman enemy in the war.
And the racism.
It provided the justification, the dehumanization. Stereotypes were rampant. Armenians don't integrate. They secretly hate us. They're treacherous. They were painted as fundamentally incompatible with the vision of a modern, unified, nationalist Turkey. Turkey first, essentially.
Making them seem like a threat that needed removing.
Exactly. And again, the modern aspect comes in. Industrial technology, especially the railways, made the systematic deportation and killing possible on such a vast scale.
And the economic motive wasn't just about removing competitors.
No, the sources also highlight the financial side. German banks like Deutsche Bank and German construction companies were involved in major projects in the region, like the Berlin-Baghdad Railway.
So they benefited from the stability or the resources that the removal of the Armenians might bring.
They certainly benefited from the projects happening in the area, collaborating with the Ottoman government, even as these atrocities were unfolding nearby. It shows how finance and industry could be intertwined with this violence.
Okay, let's bring this pattern of violence closer to home, perhaps. An internal example where the system fails the powerless. The sources mentioned the Romani people, the Gitanos, in Spain.
Yes, a really stark example. In 1749, the Spanish crown ordered something called the Gran Redada, the Great Roundup, or general imprisonment.
What was the aim?
It was effectively an attempted genocide. The plan was to arrest every single Romani man, woman, and child in Spain, separate the men from the women permanently in different prisons or workhouses to stop them having children, to basically end the Romani people in Spain within a generation.
That's horrifying. Does it succeed?
Critically, no, not fully. And the reason it failed, according to the sources, is fascinating. The wider Spanish population, ordinary people, protested. They objected, they hid people, they made it impossible for the government to carry it out completely.
So public opposition actually stopped it. Civil society intervened.
Yes, the physical extermination was largely thwarted by public outcry and non-cooperation, But, and this is key, the economic imperialism continued.
How so?
The Romanis were often stripped of their possessions, their traditional livelihoods were disrupted, and they remained deeply impoverished for centuries. And then there's the cultural aspect.
You mean flamenco
Uh,
and their distinctive clothing.
exactly. Flamenco music and dance, the colorful traje de sevillanas dress. These became iconic symbols of Spanish culture, heavily marketed for tourism.
A national asset.
A huge national asset. But did the Romani communities, whose culture this fundamentally is, receive any real economic benefit from this global branding?
I'm guessing not.
Generally, no. And this is where the link to capitalism and modernization comes in again, subtly. The legal systems of the modern world, things like copyright law, intellectual property.
They're designed to protect things like inventions, patents, books, things produced by the modern industrial literate world.
That's the argument. They were set up to benefit the powerful, the corporations, the respectable creators within the dominant culture. But they offered little or no protection for collective, traditional, often unwritten cultural heritage like that of the Romani.
So their cultural wealth, could it be freely appropriated and commercialized by the majority while they remain marginalized?
Yes. The system itself, the legal and economic structure, was inherently biased towards the modernizers and failed to protect or even recognize the value created by the non-modernized. It facilitated exploitation.
Wow. Okay, so we've traced these connections. Modernization creates pressure, imperialism provides the mechanism for expansion and control, and racism provides the moral justification. We've seen it play out historically. What does this mean for us now? The sources push us to connect 1914 to 2025. Are we just seeing history rhyme?
That's the big question, isn't it? And to answer it, we need to look at those very long-term causes again. The sources are pretty clear here.
Sure.
The core drivers are still with us. Capitalism, originating way back, maybe 15th century, is still the dominant global economic system, right?
Undeniably.
And the Industrial Revolution. Well, we're arguably in its third or fourth wave now, computation, data, AI, but the fundamental drive for technological advancement and its economic application hasn't gone away. It's accelerated.
So the deepest structural causes,
Right.
they're basically the same.
Functionally, yes. The very long-term drivers that shaped 1914 are still shaping 2025. And even some of the long-term causes feel familiar, don't they?
Like nationalist competition?
Absolutely. Maybe it looks different now. Trade wars, tech races, my country first politics. But that competitive nationalism is definitely still around. And competition between powerful economic groups, global corporations,
Yeah.
that hasn't vanished either.
And the sources suggest these enduring drivers continue to produce similar problems today.
Yes, they list several persistent issues, things like the false meritocracy, this idea that success is purely based on individual effort, which masks deep structural inequalities and opportunity.
So the system claims fairness, but often perpetuates privilege.
Right. Then there are the huge ecological crises like climate change, which are direct results of industrial activity and resource consumption driven by this economic model.
And social problems.
Yeah, things like atomization, that's the breakdown of communities, increasing loneliness, individualism. People feel disconnected.
Which can make them more susceptible to
What?
fear-based politics?
Yeah.
Nationalism?
It certainly can. When people feel isolated and anxious, simplistic narratives about us versus them can be very appealing.
Which brings us back to the danger of imperialism and racism today. Is imperialism still relevant if we don't have vast colonial empires in the same way?
Well, imperialism isn't just about planting flags. It's about extending power and influence through economic pressure, financial control, military force, cultural dominance, you name it, often to benefit corporate or national interests.
The neo-imperialism.
You could call it that. And the real danger, the sources warn, is how quickly racist ideas can be weaponized in this context. Prejudices might start small stereotypes, jokes about backward people or unmodernized groups.
Seemingly harmless stuff.
Maybe seems harmless. But when a crisis hits, economic downturn, political instability, a pandemic, those underlying prejudices can suddenly become the justification for discrimination, for oppression, for really brutal actions. That stereotype becomes a moral license to act badly.
We need to be vigilant then about how easily prejudice can escalate.
Extremely vigilant.
It's quite a sobering connection we've traced. Imperialism, modernization, racism deeply tangled, fueled by capitalism and industrialization, creating these patterns of violence and exploitation that echo through history and are still with us today.
It really is. But the final point the sources make is also crucial. Imperialism isn't inevitable. It's presented as a choice. A choice made by powerful groups acting in their own perceived interest.
So, If the underlying systems, economic, technological power dynamics, are similar to those that led to 1914, what makes the difference? How do we avoid those outcomes?
That's the provocative question for all of us, isn't it? What are the essential non-material things? Maybe critical thinking, strong community ties, social organization, the willingness to actively challenge prejudice even when it's uncomfortable.
Like the civilians in Spain who protested the Romani Roundup.
Exactly. What actions today represent that kind of civil courage, that willingness to push back against power acting purely in self-interest? That's what we really need to figure out navigating our world in 2025.